Boom! Your man Andrew coming back to you with another video. I'm going to be talking about the very first thing you need to know about Werewolf the Apocalypse, and that is Pups. Creating that character, the beginning character, and the beginning portion of that character coming through. Not a seasoned werewolf you're bringing in down the line, but that first rage, the feeling, the frenzy, the terror inside, and taking all of that emotion. Because if you want to make this more than D&D with Krynos, what you need to do in the game is really get across the tremendous scope of emotions, because werewolves feel things 1,000 times stronger than we do. They are passion personified with claws and fangs and burning desires that are so real that they want to just rip right out of the chest of the werewolf. And combine that with the angst, with the hate, with the love, with the lust of a 13, a 14, a 15, a 16-year-old kid, and then give them the power to do anything they want to anyone who has offended them or angered them, and the utter lack of self-control to do just those things, and those dark desires come up. Now, the first rage is often one that unfortunately leaves a werewolf's family, particularly if they are not closely watched, if they are of a line that for some reason has been forgotten, or there have been no werewolves, no fruit born from that line for long enough that they are no longer being watched, or the werewolves that were watching them just aren't paying that much attention. Because let's face it, in the final nights, the werewolves are losing. There aren't that many of them, and they can't be playing babysitter to a bunch of young possible prospect pups, because you never know who's going to turn until they just come ripping out with claw and fur. And what happens to their family is they are often torn apart, literally ripped asunder, and left in a red haze of blood and bones all about an apartment or a house. And the werewolf, the child, stumbles out vaguely remembering what's happening. Perhaps someone has seen them as well, and they've incited delirium, the crazed panic of the human mind, of the human condition, to suppress what they have seen, to not allow that entry into the world of darkness for better, safer, saner pastures of the mind's eye in which we normal people wish to dwell. Werewolves are utter passion, which you got to remember, that one dot of rage on that werewolf sheet. Look for it elsewhere. It isn't there. Imagine the most out of control, steroid pumped up, growth hormone enhanced muscle head you can think of bouncing out of a club or wherever you encounter an individual like this that doesn't have great control of themselves. They aren't werewolves. Werewolves have less control than that. Sure, there are some ways down the line that werewolves can implement and augment themselves with more control. However, we're talking about your character from the very beginning, a pup who cannot do these things, does not do these things. And God help you if you're playing an Airune who starts off with a minimum of 5 rage. You are nearly ripping yourselves apart. You're going to be pissed off. The slightest of insults, you got to remember to key in on that. The slightest of insults, someone butt pushing against you, or maybe a girl, you look at her, she doesn't return, you might flip out and rip her head off. Literally, you might do things like this. This is actually very common for werewolves early on in their time. There are reasons that they are watched, because werewolves don't want to attract the attention of hunters, to unveil themselves, to rend the veil and break the delirium, to allow those that would cause them problems in other locations. But it happens all the time, and it may well happen in your character's backstory. But those are the key components that you need to play, that you need to remember when playing a pup. Passion. Dial everything up as high as you can. Even one rage is way more than any human being has. One rage is way more than any human being has. It's like being super hyper alive. If you play it that way, you'll play it well. The worst thing you can do in a werewolf game is be just passionate and be like, I'm just going to play a regular character. That's trash. And you'll see that sort of trash in a werewolf game. Just a roll and dice power game and min-maxing away. 5 combat, no athletics, just garbage characters. Don't be that sort of individual. Don't fall into that trap. It's unfortunately one of the bad knocks on the game. But when you're playing from the beginning, if you take it and you make a real teenager, perhaps even a preteen. I've started a werewolf character as early as 12. So that is something to really think about when, the character's starting to hit puberty. From the beginning to the middle of puberty is really when you're going to have that experience. You're not going to have a lot of, 20-year-old I just turned into a werewolf. That's incredibly rare. Most of them are 12 to 16 when they pop into full view that first time. I'm talking about Hominids, of course, but you know, there's probably a very horrifying situation for lupuses as well. You know, all of a sudden you're a wolf, and now you start to think things. You're a wolf with man-like intelligence, I tell you. So keep that in mind when you're playing werewolf, that you need to dial everything up to 10 or maybe up to 11, and just really push the pace and balance those emotions out. Deal with all this sort of thing. Great sort of source material. Watch any of these angsty teen movies, those sort of characters, and then just add some utter psychotic murderousness into them with a great deal of aggression, and that is a great base for playing the character, portraying it very realistically, because as grown-ups we don't have that same passionate fire that we had when we were in our adolescence, when we were going through puberty, but your werewolf character does. So try to remember that, and remember, up on 11.